Can you hear me, James?
Oh, you're like no other. Needs an election like.
Chair Voss?
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to let you know that as far as I have been able to tell, you do have a quorum. There's quite a few people I have to scroll through, but I have seen 12 actual board members confirmed.
Okay, thanks.
Just checking in, Mayor Jones from San Marcos.
Looks like it is 10 o'clock. I will welcome you to the July 10th Sandag Board of Directors meeting. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If we can get the flag on the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we jump into the meeting, I want to ask Tessa to confirm on the record that we do have a quorum.
Thank you and good morning. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Tessa. In case you haven't noticed, we've transitioned to Zoom this week, so I'm going to ask General Counsel John Kirk to please run quickly through any process changes we should be aware of. John?
Thank you, Chair. As noted on the cover page of today's agenda, in addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's board meeting. In order to provide live comments, the public should join the Zoom meeting through the link provided, and that's on the cover page of the meeting agenda. When public comments are called for on an item, if you are participating via the internet platform, click on the raise hand icon on the Zoom toolbar, and the chair will call on you by the name that you provided. Alternately, if you are participating by telephone, you can press *9 on your telephone to indicate your desire to speak, and the chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. There's no need to mute your microphone. The organizers will unmute you when you are called on. And these instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda on www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Let's move on to public comment. Tessa, I'm going to rely on you to tell me if there are any hands raised or public comment.
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any hands raised for general public comments.
Okay, and just to be clear, members of the public who would like to offer public comment not related to a matter on today's agenda, you can raise your hand at this time so we can call on you. But seeing no raised hands, I will move on to member comment. Do we have any member comment from board members? I see no board member comment. Tessa, you can stop me if there's a hand raised that I'm not seeing.
Mr. Chair, this is Mayor Sotelo-Solis.
Mayor Sotelo-Solis, good morning.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to take this quick moment to thank Sandag staff. Yesterday we had a nonprofit roundtable where I know that we've really complimented the staff and Ray Major and the team for statistics and reports that they've been putting out regarding COVID-19, the economic impact. And I just want to publicly thank them for participating and preparing the, the statistics that we've all been privy to, but sharing it in a forum that other nonprofits and other partners in our community in National City as well as in the South Bay were able to digest and watch through a webinar yesterday. So I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to thank both Hassan and Ray for that.
You bet. Thank you, Mayor. Before we go on, I want to recognize two outgoing members of the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, otherwise known as ITALC. ITALC members are volunteers who freely give their time to make sure the taxpayers are getting the biggest bang for their Transnet buck. First up, Kai Raymer, experienced, insightful, dedicated, all words that describe Kai. We appreciate your leadership as you served as chair and vice chair of ITALC over the years, and for serving on many ITALC subcommittees over the past 7 years. And Greg Sadowski, your willingness to participate on various subcommittees, your openness to provide well thought out opinions, and your dedication to ITALC will be missed. I know that you both received plaques in the mail. Normally we'd like to be standing at the podium and get a few pictures, but nonetheless we appreciate your service. So on behalf of the board and Sandag staff, we'd like to make sure you enjoy those plaques. With sincere appreciation for your dedicated service, they read, as a member of the Transnet Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, and in recognition of your outstanding leadership and valued contributions, you have provided oversight and accountability to the Transnet program, bringing critical transportation projects and services to the San Diego region. So thank you on behalf of the board. Kai or Greg, would you like to say anything?
This is Kai. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, here's my plaque, if you can see me. Appreciate the recognition. And I guess, it's been a pleasure to serve on the committee for a number of years. And I think the one thing I'd say, in addition to thank you to you, Chairman Voss, and the board for recognizing us, is that, I'd like to compliment and recognize the staff that Sandag has that supported us, supports the committee over the years. And in my experience, it's been top notch. I've been involved with a lot of organizations, and from the previous executive director, Gary, and his staff, to the current executive director, Hassan, and especially the Transnet staff led by Jose and Ariana. I really want to just comment and recognize that they've been really superb in supporting the needs and goals of the ITALC. So thank you.
Kai, hold up that plaque once more so we can see it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Awesome.
All right.
And this is Greg. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I concur with everything that Kai has said. And I will tell you that Hassan, from my opinion, has been a breath of fresh air. And as Kai said, the staff, Julie, Adriana, Jose, and the rest of the teams that you guys have been amazing. Most importantly, I ask for the board to continue to take San Diego to new heights. And with your leadership, Mayor, I hope us all will get there. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate both of you. I see Gustavo with his hand up. Gustavo, did you want to comment on this?
I wanted to make a couple of generic comments, but I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate Annie and Greg. The comments were not related to this, so Chair, I can wait if possible.
Yeah, let's wait. Any other board members wishing to comment their appreciation for Greg and Kai? I know you're all sitting there nodding your heads, but if anybody would like to speak. Well, Greg and Kai, again, on behalf of the board, thank you. We appreciate your dedication and expertise and service. Thank you so much over the years for everything you've done.
Chair Voss?
Yes, Hassan.
Yeah, I just want to, on behalf of the staff, greatly thank Kai and Greg. They're not only put their own time to serve the region and the agency, but they have been a great guide to all of us in how San Diego should and will move forward. So I couldn't be more grateful. Frankly, if there were laws to prevent them from leaving, we would have immediately gone to the board and said do them. But I hope they stick around. But your service is very much appreciated, and your compliment to Rihanna and Jose and the team are appreciated as well. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Hassan, and once more, thank you, Kai and Greg. Now we'll move on to general board comment. Gustavo, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Voss. The first generic announcement that I wanted to make is that Caltrans earlier this week released the Mode Action Plan version 2. This is an updated plan that will improve access to walking, bicycling, and transit options throughout California. So a key effort in the action plan is to identify bicycle and pedestrian focused needs at community level in each region in the state through new Caltrans district active transportation plans. Adding more dedicated bike lanes and walking paths is crucial to improve safety and reduce the number of deaths on state roads that involve bicycles and pedestrians. So we will be reaching out to all of you so that you can provide us input on how we can improve bike lanes and walking paths in your jurisdictions and also in the state right away. And this goes hand in hand with an action that the California Transportation Commission made at the last meeting, where they committed $100 million out of the State Highway Operations and Protection Program towards active transportation. So we're really excited about this. I wanted to share that with the rest of the board. The second thing that I wanted to mention is that earlier this week, the California Transportation Foundation held the annual award ceremony, and there are two projects in San Diego that received the highest distinction. For transit project, rail project of the year, the San Elijo Lagoon double track project was recognized. This was a great partnership between SANDAG, Caltrans District 11, NCTD, and as well as the private sector with HDR Engineering, Flatiron, Skanska, and Stacy Whitbeck. The second project, the beautiful Gilman Bridge that we have on I-5, received the distinct nomination of Structure Project of the Year. And another great partnership between SANDAG, Caltrans District 11, and UCSD, and as well as the private sector with Moffett and Nickel, Safety Rabines Architects, and Mid-Coast Transit Constructors. So congratulations to all the staff that worked really hard on these projects, and they deserve this recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Gustavo. Any further board comment? I'm not seeing any hands. So we will move on to PAC chair reports. Do we have any comments from our PAC chairs? Gone on PAC chair reports. Tessa, do we have any public comment on PAC?
No, sir, I do not see any raised hands.
All righty, we will go to the executive director's report. Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Voss. Good morning to all of you. Well, it's the beginning of a new fiscal year, and your staff is continuing to push forward on the priorities, projects, and programs that are important to our region. One of those priorities is the Regional Transportation Plan. The plan is still on schedule. The draft is still on schedule to be released April 2021. The board will consider adoption of that plan in November of 2021. We are still planning to present the vision to our Joint Transportation Regional Planning and Border Committees on the 7th of August and to the board on the 14th of August. As many of you heard us before, we were planning to go to the Viejas for the 14th, but after discussing with Chair Voss, we made the decision that it will be a virtual meeting like the meeting we're having today. On the Central Mobility Hub and the NAVOR work, our work is moving forward. I want to thank our partners from the U.S. Navy, especially Joe Stuyvesant and his team. We're continuing to meet and collaborate. We are beginning to get the P3 consultants on board, and the Navy is continuing to finish up its environmental work on the 70-acre property. In Sacramento, the bill for CEQA streamlining is moving as we speak. It went to the Assembly, two subcommittees to the floor of the Assembly, passed unanimously, and now it's into the way forward to the Senate. I will be updating you as we see. The Mid-Coast Trolley Project, which is an amazing 11-mile extension of the trolley from Old Town to the university area, is moving forward. We are still on schedule to finish and hand this over to our Metropolitan Transit Agency next year, late next year. I believe this is going to be one of the best performing lines we have in the system. On the Del Mar Bluff, you heard earlier from our government affairs staff, we had some good news of receiving $5 million from the state, $11.6 million from the federal government, and we're about to submit an application for the state. As we promised you, we would hope that very soon we're going to say we took care of all the short-term fixes to stabilize the bluff. A very good news, last month, Sandag and the Southern California Tribal Chairman Association signed an MOU to implement a collaborative strategies objective on the regional transportation plan. Chair Voss and I went to Sican Resort and Casino for the association meeting to sign the MOU. This MOU will provide $200,000 toward our work on the strategies objectives agreed upon at the Tribal Summit in 2018, including the intra-regional tribal transportation strategy. Sandag is committed to our tribal nations who are neighbors and our partners. We look forward to working together on cooperative initiatives. And I can say Chairman Voss and myself were very pleased to know that we are moving forward with our partners. Late last week, we received a copy of CalPERS report summarizing an audit of Sandag and 57 other agencies. CalPERS conducted their audits earlier this year, reviewing the period of January 1st, 2017 through December 31st, 2019. Of the 58 agencies, 47 had findings. In Sandag case, the audit looked at the agency's current practice of reporting performance bonuses paid to employees. CalPERS determined that in order for a bonus pay to be considered principal compensation, the Sandag Board of Directors, as the agency governing board, need to approve the Sandag employee handbook. Currently, this responsibility is delegated to the executive director through agency bylaws. Therefore, we will be bringing the employee handbook and agency bylaws to the board for review and approval at a future meeting. Sandag staff will be working with CalPERS in the coming months to review the findings and correct any noted transaction. I want to thank staff for their quick action upon receipt of the CalPERS finding, which I believe our HR director received it last Thursday, and we're reporting to you today. Chair Voss, I want to conclude by the report by thanking all of you, a few of you who invited us to be speaking to groups. I want to thank Mayor Solis yesterday for inviting Ray and myself to speak to the nonprofit But I want to assure you that we're continuing to reach people in San Diego to talk about important stuff, especially during a very difficult time of COVID-19. And finally, our plan to open the office did not change for staff right now. The executive team members and those who feel they can come will come. We will do it safely. But we are delaying opening the office to the public, which we originally thought it will happen next Monday. The office will continue to be closed, giving the new advisory from the county and the state of California. Chair Voss, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hassan. Tessa, do we have any public comment on the executive director's report?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not seeing any raised hands.
Thank you. Any member comment on the executive director's report? I am not seeing any raised hands on that. So we will move on to the consent calendar. Thank you, Hassan. Do we have any public comment on consent, Tessa?
No raised hands, Chair.
Thank you. And board comment or questions on the consent? Absent that, I'd be willing to entertain a motion to move the consent item.
I'll move approval. This is Catherine Blakespear.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
I heard a few seconds, I think, from Mayor Sotelo-Solis and from Mayor Minto. They can arm wrestle over that later, but we have a motion and a second. I'll call on the clerk, Tessa, to take the roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Chair Voss. City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Corey Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Mary Salas.
Salas, aye.
City of Coronado, Mayor Richard Bailey.
Bailey, yes.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Jim Desmond.
Desmond, yes.
City of Del Mar, Mayor Ellie Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
City of El Cajon, Mayor Bill Wells.
Wells, yes.
City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Catherine Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor Paul McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Serge Dedina.
Dedina, yes.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Bill Baber.
Baber, yes.
City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Raquel Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
City of National City, Mayor Alejandro Sotelo-Solis.
Sotelo-Solis, aye.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Jack Feller.
Yes.
City of Poway, Chair Steve Voss.
Aye.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Vivian Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Rebecca Jones.
Jones, yes.
City of Santee, Mayor John Minto.
Minto, yes.
City of Solana Beach, Councilmember David Zito.
Zito, yes.
City of Vista, Mayor Judy Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you. That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We are all getting so good at this virtual thing. Thank you for that. Moving on to item number 5, the arena plan public hearing. This is the time and place set for a public hearing to adopt the arena plan. I'd first like to ask Hassan to provide some brief comments on the item before we hear from the public and board members. Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Voss. I am sure you're all happy to know that this probably will be the last time you will discuss RENA for this cycle. So you're going to be free for 8 years from it, hopefully. The Regional Housing Need Assessment Plan is the final SANDAG document in the Regional Housing Need Assessment process. It includes the final allocation of housing units which should be used by your jurisdiction to update your housing elements. Upon its adoption by the board, staff will send the final Regional Housing Need Assessment Plan to each city and the county and to the California Department of Housing and Community Development. HCD will have 30 days to determine whether the final regional housing need allocation plan is consistent with the department projected housing units needed for the region. I know this process has not been easy, and I want to thank the board members and Regional Housing Need Assessment Subcommittee members for their efforts. While this portion of the process will be wrapping up, the important work begins for updating housing elements and building the housing needed in the region. SANDAG will remain involved by working with your cities and the county to develop a regional housing incentive program, and we will assist in receiving more housing funding from state of California. Seth, Colleen, and I are available to answer any question. And with that, back to you, Chair Vass.
Thank you. I should have mentioned before Hassan spoke that now at this moment we will take board member questions only, not comments, just questions. After those questions, we'll take public comment and then comment from board members. Following that, I will close the public hearing after those public and member comments are complete. And before I go to board member questions, I want to ask any members of the public to use the raise hand feature now if they want to provide comment on this item so that we can estimate how much time will be needed. So board questions only, please, at this point. If there are board members with questions, please raise your hand so that we know you'd like to speak. Mayor Bailey, I'm not sure if you have a question or you want to say a comment.
No
okay,
question, Chair,
you.
just comment.
Okay. Any board member questions?
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, if I may, it should be noted by all board members that this morning you received 3 letters of objection to the approval of this item from the cities of Coronado, Lemon Grove, and Solana Beach. And those are things that you should consider in making your determination today. Thank you.
Yeah, you beat me to it, John, so thank you for making that clear. I believe we have 2 members of the public on the telephone with raised hands. Tessa, if you could call out those last 4 digits so those folks can weigh in.
Thank you. Yes, sir. The first raised hand was from the public member with the last 3 digits of 046. Have been unmuted.
Good morning, Chair and board members. My name is Noah Harris, Transportation Policy Advocate with Climate Action Campaign. We urge the board to demonstrate your commitment to solving San Diego's housing crisis by adopting today's Regional Housing Needs Assessment Plan. SANDAG has the opportunity to continue your bold leadership in California by taking steps to secure more housing, and the bottom line is this: our region has failed to build enough homes, especially for very low and low-income families. I also want to take this opportunity to insist to the board that climate policy and housing policy are inextricably linked. To stop the climate crisis, we must continue taking serious steps to reduce transportation emissions, and the only path forward is to build more housing near jobs and transit. It is imperative that our elected leaders take this opportunity to secure a climate-safe and thriving future for San Diego and approve the RHNA plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Tessa, our next public comment.
Thank you, Chair. The next public comment was from public member with the last 3 digits of 411. You are now unmuted.
Hi, this is Lindsay Jakes on behalf of Circulate San Diego, calling in support of adopting the final Regional Housing Needs Assessment Plan. We support this plan because it addresses the growing housing crisis through equitable and sustainable growth. This plan will bring much needed affordable housing options to the region while making our communities transit-oriented destinations accessible to everyone. By focusing on the transit-oriented growth, the plan improves the mobility of our communities while improving the sustainability of the region. The plan ensures affordable housing in communities where it's needed the most, making our communities more equitable and accessible to people of all incomes. Please adopt this plan as it increases the equity, mobility, and sustainability of our communities while improving the existing housing crisis. Thank you.
Tessa, do we have any further public comment before we go to board comment?
Yes, Chair, I have one more raised hand from the public member, Rebecca Lieberman. Ma'am, you are unmuted. Oh, now you are unmuted.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Lieberman, and I'm speaking on behalf of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber has been supportive of SANDAG throughout this entire RENA process, from adopting the state recommended numbers to the development of the methodology. The business community supports new housing and will be a partner with you in planning for and the development of housing that can accommodate our workforce. We need a variety of housing to support job growth in order to ensure opportunity for all segments of our population throughout the region. The Chamber is extremely grateful to SANDAG staff for the time and energy they have dedicated to this important issue. With that, we urge you to adopt the final Regional Housing Needs Assessment Plan. Thank you for your time.
That's our last call for public comment before we go to board comment.
Chair, I do not see any further raised hands at this time.
Thank you. We will now move to board comment. Mayor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair Voss. At our last meeting, the cities of Coronado, Imperial Beach, Lemon Grove, and Solana Beach, we all submitted our appeals of the RENA allocation. This RENA plan does not lead to more housing. It simply leads to a paper chase. We all know this. And a supermajority, 14 of the SANDAG members, were in favor of granting all 4 RENA appeals in full, based on the presentations and findings of each city. However, consistent with recent history, a weighted vote was called that denied the appeals without making any findings on the record to explain why the appeals were insufficient, and in the process disenfranchised nearly 1.5 million residents of San Diego County. The City of Coronado contends the use of the weighted vote for its appeal was improper, and we urge the board to reject the proposed final RENA allocation plan and vote no. That concludes my comments.
Chair, you're muted.
Mayor Dedina.
Sorry, you were muted as well. Yeah, I just want to echo my colleague Richard Bailey's comments. I'm all for it, in favor. Imperial Beach is all in favor of a progressive housing plan. Unfortunately, this is just not it. I can't go back and tell my residents that our new housing plan dictated by the state and SANDAG will include 60% of the housing prescribed as upper income housing. I don't have a single resident in my working class community who are being devastated by the economic tsunami that we're dealing with, who are close to being evicted from their high rent apartment buildings, even though we have low rents compared to the county, who are telling me they need more multi-million-dollar housing in Imperial Beach. They can't even afford the middle class housing, which is about $500,000 to $650,000 to buy a house. So this plan, we've talked a lot about equity and equality and climate. There's absolutely no climate model attached to this plan. It would actually make our climate emissions worse. But more importantly, just in terms of an equity angle, I find it hard to understand how Imperial Beach will be asked to take more housing than our colleagues in cities to the north, which have vastly more land, more money, and greater population. So I'm just putting this on the record that I get a little concerned about progressive platitudes about how great this plan is when if we implemented it, would completely gentrify Imperial Beach and turn the last working class beach town in Southern California in San Diego County into just another great, super great, wealthier beach town, but that's not what my residents have asked for. So with that, I'm gonna vote no on it, continue to make sure that we understand that we can all talk about the platitudes and how it's a progressive plan that focuses on equity. And frankly, this is not true. Thank you.
Thank you, Serge. Mayor Jones.
Thank you. So in San Marcos, I have about 7% of my total housing as deed restricted affordable. We are okay with our 3,100 homes number, though I'm not sure how we're going to meet that. I'm very concerned with the appeals that they were not approved by this board. I think that we are setting up the cities of Imperial Beach, Solana Beach, and Lemon Grove and Coronado for failure, because now we are providing the state with a way to raise more revenue with these fines that can be implemented when these cities cannot actually absorb these high numbers. They're too small, and in the case of Coronado, there is just not enough land. So I appeal to the board that we take another look at this. I am not in support of this for the reason that we are not absorbing. And actually, let me go back to we don't need to absorb this housing for those smaller cities. What we would be able to do is work within the legislation that allows us to not have those actual units absorbed throughout the county. And again, almost 172,000 homes for us to build in the county is a very, very steep number when we only spent, well, in the last 10 years, we only built about 60,000. So anyway, I implore the rest of the board to please pay attention to that and vote to take the appeals and have another look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. I apparently missed a member of the public who wanted to speak, so let me just pause board comment. Megan Kirkaby, I want to make sure we allow the public the opportunity to be heard. So Megan, are you there? Megan Kirkaby.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. I did actually raise my hand too late, so I'm okay if you want to skip me. I realize
No, I'd like you to be heard if you can be very brief, please.
Very brief. Just my name is Megan Kirkaby. I'm from the California Department of Housing and Community Development, and just want to reiterate that we are here to help. We know this is hard. And on the comment about the higher income RENA, just a reminder that you do not, that you can zone any size or density plans in order to meet the higher income RENA. It's the lower income RENA that must be at a sufficiently large density. And so those units don't have the same level of restriction. So there is some flexibility for communities on that, and encourage you to participate in SANDAG's office hours with the HCD team and to get some one-on-one technical assistance throughout this cycle. Thanks, have a good day.
Thank you. We'll go next to Councilmember David Zito. Good morning, David.
Morning, and thank you, Chair. And also thanks for calling out the letters that were submitted. I did want to also note the letters that were submitted by Solana Beach, Lemon Grove, and Coronado, and many of the procedural and logical issues and gaps that were noted in those letters, but I don't want to specifically go over those. I think they speak for themselves. I do think it's worth talking a little bit about what happened and has happened and what it also says about our current environment. To review, what happened at the appeals meeting and what's been going on is each city reviewed their appeals, raising multiple compelling and interesting arguments. Staff presented their position on the appeals, and as usual with our staff, this position was well presented and thorough, but was certainly grounded in guidance provided by the prior weighted votes taken by this board. Many of the points are clearly open to interpretation as outlined by the arguments the appellants made last meeting, and many of the points that the appellants raised were not even addressed. After this, a motion was presented to accept the appeals with a well-supported path forward that presents virtually no negative impacts to the other jurisdictions outside of perhaps continuing to occupy some staff time. I don't know if this request or if the motion had passed, if it would ultimately succeed. We'll never find out because the motion wasn't allowed to be heard, but rather a substitute motion to deny was put on the floor and ultimately moved forward with support from only 5 of 19 jurisdictions. No discussion and no debate by the supporters, no individual consideration of any of the individual appeals or any of the points raised, no comments at all on many of the points raised in all of the appeals. That was simply moved forward. In addition to this, it's worth noting that the methodology to date has had no notable adjustments since being brought before the full board, outside of a couple of very minor and small tweaks to the city of Coronado, and has never managed to even once garner the support of the majority of the board. This is not a strategy for providing housing in the region. This is not a strategy for getting a well-functioning board. All of this demonstrates an incredible lack of respect for the intent of this board and many of its members. And frankly, it borders on bullying behavior. I believe that, you know, when I'm on my council and when we disagree, we debate, we listen, we repeat back the points we've heard, we've internalized each other's viewpoints. Here, there is no debate, no acknowledgement of even hearing the information presented. And yes, we've been discussing this for a long time, but many of the points were new. And the fact that these jurisdictions took the time to commit their staff to do the appeals, this is an indication of how important this is. And as Mayor Jones said, the incredibly difficult position all four of these cities are going to be put into by the current methodology. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm disappointed where the way this has gone, and hope that it's not an indication of things to come. Thank you. Oh, with that, I'd also like to make a motion to deny adoption of the final RENA plan.
Bailey seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Zito. I saw Council President Gomez's hand up and now it disappeared. Council President, did you still wish to speak?
Yeah, sure. I wasn't going to, but I'll go ahead and I'm supportive. I'm supportive of this moving us forward. And I just have to speak in relation to protecting our low-income communities, specifically for the issues that Mayor Serge Dedina has raised. Very sympathetic to that. I just want to remind all my colleagues here that how we as electeds end up implementing our land use implementation. It's up to each city. I know that there are tools to ensure that we're protecting our current residents, such as making sure that there is protections, and I'm more than happy to have those discussions with individual folks, but there are ways in which we can protect our most vulnerable and also encourage developers to do more as we move forward. RENA is a great tool. It's setting cities up to really try to maximize, but this is not the land use decision that we're doing here. And really, I just really want to stress the importance that each city has still the power to implement its land use authority. That's not being taken away, but what you do as a city and how you implement, how you move forward to add additional housing is going to be very critical, in how you manage the protection of older communities or low-income community members, which is really critical. It's an issue that I've spent quite a lot of time. It's still very much doable outside of RENA discussions. So I'm glad that we're bringing up equity. It's been a major argument against those folks that are not supportive of RENA, but I just really want to stress that this is not about equity. It's not about protecting our low-income community members. Now, all of that really leads to the cities and how we end up implementing it. So I just really want to stress, and like I said, more than happy to share my thoughts to each individual city and how to do that through policy making. There are ways, and that we should be doing that. So with that, I do think this is a document that should be adopted. We do have a housing crisis. The city of San Diego is taking the brunt of the housing requirements. We too can be opposing it, but the demand is there. And what are we going to do with the people that are needing housing? We can't turn our backs to that, because that creates a different issue. So the city's going to be challenged, and we're going to have to figure out how to step up and do more in relation to housing. And I'm proud that we're doing that, and I'm only hoping that the other cities do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Mayor Vasquez.
Yes. You know, I just want to take this opportunity to say, we know that there's a huge need for housing. And Lemon Grove is willing to do its part. And we've done our part in the past. But, you know, I think we just need to go a little further with this so that the final numbers are fair. We want this to be fair. And the biggest concern in my community is gentrification. And I think it's probably the same sentiment of Imperial Beach but it's real. And Lemon Grove is definitely committed to supporting housing to help meet the housing needs. But we know that this number that's allocated to Lemon Grove is not fair. And so in this moment, I'm just urging the entire board to really think about what we're doing, perhaps reconsider the numbers so that, you know, we're ensuring that the numbers that we have are realistic and it's something that we can glean to in the future. Now, this methodology that's in place right now, it works great for the larger cities, but honestly, not so much for the smaller cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, sadly, you know, I think everyone's been willing to step up and do their part and be part of the solution and is willing to, you know, do the heavy lifting. Unfortunately, you know, I think this is just another example of Assembly Bill 805 disenfranchising and silencing the voices and votes of the smaller communities. It was voted 14-5 to allow the appeals that would not have it would have a minor impact on our region. I think this bill and the continuing use of this weighted vote is going to be the undoing of Sandag, because it's in direct opposition to what this entity was founded upon, and that was regional collaboration. And when we see the large cities taking away our vote with AB 805, taking away our voices, taking away our vote, this does not bode well for the future Sandag. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Councilmember Moreno.
Yes, Chair Voss, I'd like to make a substitute motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. It says it cannot start your video. Okay. I'm not getting invited to share my video, so you will hear my lovely voice. But I just wanted to, one, second the motion, but also to share that, in fact, okay, 2 seconds. Okay, all right, cool. Hi, everyone. So, colleagues, this is fellow members of the board. This is the dialogue. This is where we've made the discussions or made the decisions and had the discussions. And I hear the discord and the you know, the disappointment. I do. And this is why we are here, to have that discussion. And, you know, I find it interesting that, you know, now people are blaming AB 805 for decisions that, you know, a weighted vote does make and, you know, have at the end of the day, when there's been decades of decisions that have been made that have silenced communities like mine or discriminated against. And when we have the RHNA allocations that have been, again, thought out, discussed, we have the appeals process, which is part of what we need and have to have. We're doing it right now. So, I mean, I truly respect my, you know, my colleagues' disappointment. And guess what? I'm an 8.5 square mile city, and I too have to build 5,000 plus units. And when it comes to my housing element, I'm going to work extremely close with my city staff to help make it possible. You know, we won't get a pass. You know, we're just going to keep growing in population. We're going to keep growing in demands for housing, and that's on the entire spectrum. So again, I hear my colleagues and their disappointment, but to blame the vote, that a weighted vote automatically discriminates, it does not, because there's different reasons in each one of the person's disappointments, and they're not all the same. And we heard from the community of Los Angeles, when they asked to get their appeal, they were told build more. So we are taking and showing leadership by allocating that higher number. And I guess my question would be, you know, what is fair? What is the process if, and again, Councilmember Moreno's motion did get a second, but if we were to move forward, what does that process look like? Because the analogy was given earlier in the year that it's like a balloon that has water in it. You squish it on one side, it's gonna pop out on the other side. You squish it harder, it's gonna come out on the other end. It doesn't mean that there's less water in the balloon. It just means it's gonna push out in other areas. And to communities like myself, who's already stepping up and trying to look creatively, I challenge you all. I get it, it's hard, but that's why we're here. We need to step up and do that. And for the city of San Diego to be that predominant, sorry, I have a little fruit fly. So to have the city of San Diego carry most of the weight, yes, they are the biggest community, but so do all the other communities. And we're thinking critically. This is not an easy decision. And I just want to make, you know, my colleagues aware of that. But this is that process. And to say that we're shortchanging our colleagues who are in dissent, you know, I don't think that's the case. This is the process, and this is how we're getting our opinions heard. And we know that even within our own council and jurisdictions, we hear, you know, maybe hours and hours of testimony. But we have to vote because we know that it is the best thing for our community. And to approve the RENA plan and to move forward is showing our community we're doing what is best for our communities here in the region of San Diego. So thank you, Chair. And again, I seconded the motion for Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Dedina.
Yeah, look, I get it. Everyone has to make a decision what's good for their city, but I just won't be lectured by larger cities about how we got to pull our fair share. The fact is Imperial Beach has wanted to build affordable housing for a long time. Since I was elected 6 years ago, we haven't been able to get a single grant because the state gives money to larger cities. That's a fact. The money goes to San Diego National City and Chula Vista because they have more population, they can leverage more. So, you know, to pretend that this is an equitable and fair plan when certain cities that are larger, have wealthier populations and larger land mass are asked to do less than my city. And we're told that we need to gerrymander zoning so that we can fit in the 60% of requirements for upper income when we have 40% of our city that's gonna be gobbled up by sea level rise in a plan that doesn't even acknowledge sea level rise exists. You can't pretend this is a climate friendly, equity friendly plan that's gonna help us advance when the fact is it's gonna make our city richer, which our residents don't want, and provide absolutely zero guarantee that we'll get a single dollar or a single penny from the sanctimonious housing advocates in Sacramento who haven't bothered to give us a dime when we have literally been on our knees begging. So I'm all favoring everybody doing their fair share, but the fact is just this is old school San Diego where some are more equal than others. The ones who have the most money get out of doing the most. Those of us who have the least are asked to do the most. And the fact is we're given progressive platitudes about housing, but no money to accompany it. And as someone who's a progressive Democratic mayor, I would argue that paper plans mean nothing, and dollars and cents invested in the community mean everything. So we're glad to do our fair share as long as our sanctimonious housing advocates in Sacramento, who are great on doing Twitter and talking about how much housing we need, spend some money to invest in our communities. Because the fact is, they're not doing anything for us. So anyway.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not see any other board member hands raised. Correct me if I'm wrong. Deputy Mayor Feller.
I wasn't sure exactly how to even get on here, so the city of Oceanside is gladly taking the 5,400 units. I think we've also stated for the record we'd be happy to take more units. But the problem is not just the requirements, but you have a vast community that doesn't want any more anywhere. So the communities that are trying to build 500, 1,000, 2,000 units are not allowed, and the requirements by the state are so onerous that we cannot build housing. And frankly, the building industry would love to build 171,000 homes of all types. So I don't. We'd be glad to take more, but I don't think that we're being allowed to actually build where we can build, where there is some space. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Again, I see no further hands raised. I'll give you another 10 seconds to get in front of me here, either waving at the camera or raising your hand on your computer. Seeing no further comments from the board, I will now close the public hearing. The request today is to adopt the final RENA plan by adopting resolution 2021-02. That's on a substitute motion from Councilmember Moreno and a second from Mayor Sotelo Solis. I will now call on the clerk for a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. On item number 5, City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, aye.
City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, no.
County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Desmond, no.
City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
El Cajon, no.
City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, no.
City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Dedina, no.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Baber.
Baber, no.
City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, no.
City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Jack Feller.
No.
City of Poway, Chair Voss.
No.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, no.
City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, no.
City of Solana Beach, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, no.
City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, no.
Thank you. That motion fails with all members present.
Chair, this is Vivian. I'd like to call for a weighted vote.
Councilmember Moreno calling for a weighted vote.
Hearing no second.
I'll second. This is Catherine Blakespear.
That was a second from Vice Chair Blakespear. Please confirm for me. Second from Blakespear.
Yes, that was a second.
Thank you. I think I see Mr. Bailey wanting to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Question for the board. How much longer can this body continue to function while calling for the weighted vote? Exercising the weighted vote.
You're breaking up, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Bailey, if you can hear me, we've lost you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My apologies. I'll continue. Question for the board. How much longer can this body continue to function while calling for the weighted vote? Exercising the weighted vote disenfranchises not just the supermajority of your fellow board members, it disenfranchises over 1 million residents these board members represent. This is not leadership. This is disrespectful and counterproductive to our region's goals. And frankly, it demonstrates a total lack of understanding of basic market forces that actually produces housing, and the fact that HCD allows for the appealing cities to reduce their allotment without affecting others. I also have to say that I find it ironic we're being lectured by a representative that has no background in development, whose own policies contribute to a lack of affordable housing in their own city. And I cannot, in good conscience, continue to participate in these weighted votes and carry on the illusion that somehow the public is served when 5 members can overrule 14 members without consideration and render over 1 million residents voiceless. The weighted voting mechanism of this board is broken, and it threatens the future credibility of the Stand-Ag organization. So I will be exiting the meeting prior to casting a vote as a last-ditch effort to stand up for those 1.5 million residents, and I encourage all other board members interested in a more collaborative and functional Stand-Ag to exit as well in protest. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Moreno, is your hand up?
No, it's not.
Okay. Councilmember Zito.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to express some of the same concerns as Mayor Bailey in this particular item. As per the comments I made before the tally vote, I do think that you know, the way that this has moved forward and the fact that the individual considerations weren't given just shows an incredible lack of respect for the board and the process. And due to that, and due to the fact that, you know, these are overwhelmingly regional issues that are being dictated by an incredibly small number of jurisdictions in that region, I don't feel that I can participate in a weighted vote on this last time topic either. Thank you.
Vice Chair Blake Spear.
Yeah, I'll just briefly address some of my colleagues' comments. I think Mayor Sotelo Solis went into this, but the weighted vote is a different way of having this representation that is fair. So it is weighted more heavily towards cities that have more people. So you could look at it as saying, like, is the House of Representatives less fair than the Senate, where the Senate has 2 seats no matter what the population? I mean, so to me, it seems like I don't put any credibility in this notion that the weighted vote is illegitimate. To me, it's a clearly legitimate way to assess the entire region. And I'll just say that I truly do not believe that we could find a solution that everybody would be happy with. I know that some will dispute that and say, oh, it's just a little bit around the margins, just move it here or there. But as was mentioned about the balloon, you push it one way, you push it another. I think that once we start messing with it, and we also then challenge HCD, who will say, this is not in line with these equity principles we have because it's not based on anything except for politics. We end up then in a quagmire with ourselves, as well as potential regulatory and legal disputes with the state. And all of that seems to me like it doesn't forward these goals at all. So all of us have to provide more housing. And underneath so many of these arguments, I just always go back to feeling like it's essentially an anti-housing NIMBYism of saying we don't want development, we don't want change, we don't want anything different. And I understand that that can come across as being maybe harsh, but in some ways, the recognition that adding more housing is politically difficult for every single one of our cities for all sorts of different reasons, and recognizing that housing is a good and a need, and we have a housing crisis, and we have, of course, the effects of coronavirus that are further going to deplete people's ability to provide for themselves and provide housing, that housing is something that we have to just accept that we have to do. And I feel, and I can hear my colleagues' extreme angst about having to do that. And I'll say that the city of Encinitas has had that angst and has dealt with that for the last 8 years in the last housing cycle. And I have personally been heavily involved in traveling to Sacramento, court orders, constituents outraged, all of the difficulties that we have as elected officials. And to me, when I look at this result, it seems to me like it's fair. I think the city of San Diego is taking more than their fair share, and the rest of us, there are some that could be a little less, and that would be good too, but it's like, you know, we need to provide more housing, so let's just do it. So I'll end my comments there, but just say that I hope my colleagues continue to participate in this board. It's the only transportation board, of course, that we have in the county, the only board where all of the 18 jurisdictions are here. I think it's valuable. This is the process. We're going through it and sharing our opinions and continuing to participate in good faith, even when you lose, is part of the process. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further board comment? We have a motion from Councilmember Moreno and a second from Vice Chair Blakespear calling for the weighted vote.
Chair Voss, this is Bill Wells from El Cajon.
Yes, sir.
I just want to go on the record that I'm going to be exiting and not voting out of protest.
Okay, thank you. Any other board comment?
Hello, members of
Baber from La Mesa.
Mr. Baber.
Can I ask, how does this affect quorum? Do you recalculate quorum or not? And if so, what's the current?
Can we have Mr. Kirk on that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Your quorum is a majority of member agencies that are present at the meeting. If a member remains present at the meeting, regardless of whether they vote, they are considered to be a part of the quorum that is required. If a member exits the meeting, then they would not count toward that quorum, and ultimately, in order to take action, you require 10 of 19 jurisdictions to be present in the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. I see Mr. Feller waving his arms at me.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, do we use weighted vote when we elect the chair? That's all I have to say.
Yes, you do.
Any further comment or question? Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to, again, share with my colleagues, and I think it was reiterated with Vice Chair Blakespear. Look, nobody likes having to make difficult decisions, but to use a cop-out to say that I'm not liking this, I'm going to leave the meeting and not be part of the process, show your vote. Don't walk away. Show what this is. If you're in opposition, you're in opposition. But to say that you're not okay with the way we as a board are functioning is trying to put cracks in the system that now is showing equity. And for the most part, as we were saying earlier, the weighted vote is based on equity. It's one vote, one person, and based on population. So with that, again, I appreciate my colleagues. This is tough, but you know what? That's why we're here. And to say that you're going to protest to leave, that just shows, shows a little bit about you. Thank you.
Any further board comment? You'll need to wave your arms or raise your hand.
Are you guys monitoring who's in? Yeah.
We have a motion and a second. Can the clerk or general counsel weigh in? Do we have a quorum?
Thank you, Chair. We do still maintain a quorum.
Thank you. Please take the roll call vote.
City of Carlsbad, Councilmember Schumacher.
Schumacher, aye.
City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Dallas, aye.
City of Coronado, absent. County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond. It's not there. I believe Supervisor is absent. City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
Clerk, want to double check, shouldn't there also be a County B?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for that reminder. County of San Diego, Supervisor Kristen Gaspar. I believe she's also absent. City of Encinitas, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Blakespear, yes.
City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara. I believe Mayor McNamara is absent. City of Imperial Beach.
Tessa, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I think you skipped over Del Mar and El Cajon.
Oh, City of El Cajon is Mayor Wells is absent. And City of Del Mar, Mayor Haviland.
Haviland, yes.
Okay. Catch up. City of Escondido is absent. City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
No.
City of La Mesa, Councilmember Baber. Absent. City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Vasquez, no.
City of National City, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
City of Oceanside, Deputy Mayor Feller.
No.
City of Poway, Chair Voss.
No.
City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Councilmember Moreno proudly says yes.
City of San Diego, Council President Gomez.
Yes.
City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones. Marcus absent.
I think we missed a San Diego.
What do you mean she killed it?
No, we have both.
Did you get both? I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Need my glasses.
City of San Marcos is absent. City of Solana Beach, council members, oh, I'm sorry, City of Santee, Mayor Minto. Mark is absent. City of Solana Beach, council member Zito. I will mark as absent. City of Vista, Mayor Ritter. I will mark as absent. That item passes with the members present and 4 members voting no.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 6, an update on the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans. Colleen.
Thank you, Chair Voss. Richard Chavez and I are pleased to be able to present to you today an update on the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans. This is a mouthful, and we know how much all of us love acronyms in the world of transportation planning, so we have another one, the CMCPs. And just to really kind of explain, these comprehensive multimodal corridor plans are more detailed planning, sort of drawing down from the regional plan. Next slide. 2 previous actions have led us to where we are today to be working on these efforts. So last July, this board of directors asked Zandig staff to provide an update on the 5 big moves. And as part of that action, the direction was given to develop a regional plan that meets federal and state targets, assumes realistic and transportation revenues, utilizes the 5 big moves and the complete corridors model, and prioritizes corridors previously scheduled for investment, such as State Route 78, 52, 67, and the 94, 125. And that was backed up then further with a board action in September that approved $40 million toward these comprehensive corridor planning efforts. So really what's happening is we're taking the framework from the regional plan and working on the more detailed aspects of each of these corridors. They need to be multimodal, and they also will include a comprehensive list of projects that then would move into more detailed environmental review and ultimately to construction. Next slide, Kendall. Doors.
Pauline, you're muted.
I am? As I mentioned previously, these really kind of drill down further from what's in the regional plan and are more detailed. And these corridor plans now are required by the California Transportation Commission to be competitive for SB1 funds. Next slide. CMCPs are not new to the region. We've been doing them for a long time, and probably one of the CMCPs that most of you are very familiar with is the North Coast Corridor Plan. This is what we consider a first-generation CMCP because it looked at improvements in the rail corridor, improvements on the local streets and roads for bikes and peds, as well as improvements on the highway corridor, so the HOV lanes, and the environmental improvements in the area, as well as transportation demand management measures. At the time that this was done, each of these efforts were done somewhat individually, but it was looked at comprehensively. Next slide. So a fully integrated corridor, multimodal corridor plan is what we're looking at for each of the 12 major corridors in the region. And this looks at what happens on the freeways when it comes to goods movement, transit, HOV lanes, what happens on the local streets and roads. And so this is really the fully integrated, and you look at the interaction among all of these different transportation modes and how they assist and complement one another. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard, and he will go through the CMCPs that are getting underway today.
Thanks, Colleen. These are the phase 1 corridors that we're focusing on. These are as they have been laid out in the September 2019 budget amendment. The 5 corridors are the Purple Line, Interstate 805, Blue Line, I-5 South, High-Speed Transit, State Route 52, State Route 67, the Sprinter Palomar Airport Road, State Route 78 corridor, and then the Central Mobility Hub and connections. Next slide, please. So progress to date, we've held a workshop with our partners at District 11. We've developed, formed teams and developed work plans for each of the corridors, defined the geographical areas that I'll show you that exhibit here in just a second. And we've drafted issues and opportunity statements for each of the corridors, which appear in your agenda package on pages 68 and 69. We would very much appreciate comments from the board and the public on these issues and opportunity statements. Keep in mind, these are drafts, and these will evolve over time, especially as we start conducting stakeholder and community outreach. Next slide. So these are the geographical areas, and a couple things to point here. Staff is recommending that we combine the Purple Line I-805, Blue Line I-5 South corridor into one corridor study. A lot of geographical overlap in the infrastructure for those 2 corridors. So we're recommending that those 2 be combined into one corridor study. We're also recommending splitting the State Route 52 or C to Santee and the State Route 67 or San Vicente corridor. very much geographical differences between those corridors. The State Route 67, of course, being a very rural corridor, State Route 52 being more urban. So we're recommending separate corridor studies for those two. The North County corridor, State Route 78 shown in blue, and the geographical area for the Central Mobility Hub and connections shown in yellow. Next slide. So if you take into consideration all of the policy guidance laid out by the California Transportation Commission, the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, for developing corridor studies, you can kind of boil all those corridor considerations, policy considerations into these 12 categories. These are going to be used by the corridor teams to frame the discussion with the stakeholders and community on everything that should be evaluated, what should be looked at when developing these corridor studies. This will help to come up with the right transportation solutions and the priority for those solutions for each unique corridor study. Next slide. And this is my last slide, kind of where we've been, where we're going. Again, we've got the work plans in place, we've got the teams in place. Heading into the fall of this year, we'll be presenting the results of data analysis as well as what we're hearing from the stakeholders. That'll be going to Transportation Committee, I'm guessing the board and other policy committees as well for review and discussion. Heading into this, the winter of 2020, 2021, we plan to get out to the community, start discussing these corridor plans with the individual communities, and then heading into summer and summer of 2021, presenting the draft and final corridor plans for review and discussion. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you very much, Colleen and Richard. Tessa, do we have any public comment on this? This is a discussion only item. Do we have public comment?
Thank you, Chair.
Jack, you're not a member of the public.
There are no public raised hands.
Okay, thank you. Now, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Thank you. I'd like to know, if possible, who is actually on the, who makes up the Planning Technical Working Group in the steering committee. That's it.
Colleen?
So we have 2 members of the technical working group. We have a member from the City of San Diego, and Richard, you have to help me out. Who's the other representative? I know we were talking with the planning director from San Marcos.
It's actually Jeff from City of Oceanside, Jeff Hunt.
Oh, thank you.
So it's just the 2 of them?
Those are the 2 representatives, Mayor, from the technical working group, but we are taking all of this information through the whole group of planning directors on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you.
Let me see here. Councilmember Moreno.
Can you guys hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, exciting to learn that the 5 of the comprehensive multimodal corridor plans are moving forward and are anticipated to be completed by the summer of 2021. Although these are 5, what is the acronym Cmcps being discussed today, I would like to highlight the importance of the Purple Line Corridor. Purple Line Corridor is going to connect the South Bay to major employment centers in San Diego, creating mobility throughout the region. The report highlights that 10 of the region's top 50 bottlenecks are located within this corridor. So this plan is needed more than ever. I would like to highlight the need for an intermodal transportation center in San Ysidro as a mobility hub, which would complete the proposed, which would complement the proposed central mobility hub. The San Ysidro ITC would provide multiple transportation options for San Diego and binational community. The Purple Line also encompasses the Otay Mesa border region, which is one of the last vacant prime industrial lands in the city of San Diego. We have an opportunity to think of transportation for the future as this land continues to be developed. I'm very supportive of the proposed comprehensive multimodal corridor plan, but I think we need to think about the future growth of the region and also the opportunities to improve transportation options. So with that, that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Council President Gomez.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for this presentation. I think a lot of us are waiting to see what's next with these ideas. So I'm glad that we're having a roadmap. I do have a question in relation to second to your last slide where you listed the areas that are going to be incorporated into the analysis. Are all of these, how are they going? Is it an equal level, or what is the thought behind it and how they're going to be incorporated into the analysis on the different corridors? I just want to hear more about that.
Kendall, could you go back one slide? I think the council president is maybe talking about this map. Is this what you were talking
No,
about?
I was looking to the one that you had before on the.
Okay.
Yeah, the considerations. How are these being considered? And I just want to know, just in terms of equal value, what's the, speak more to it, because I think they're important, and I would argue that they're all important equally. So I just want to understand that.
Yes, so each of the corridor studies will need to show how each of these elements have been considered within that corridor planning effort. So, you know, in some cases, there may be a particular policy consideration that really has to be emphasized because it had been left out so significantly in the past. So, I think each of the work plans are sort of working through to what degree, if some of these need to be more emphasized than others. But the teams and I agree with you that these are all important, and there would be no intention to ever leave any of them out. So hopefully that responds to your question.
It does and it doesn't. That's the, I mean, that's the reason I'm asking, because the way that you're answering it, you're telling me that yes, that we all agree that they're all important, but how they get incorporated is still a little bit mushy. So maybe this is, maybe there's more thinking behind it, but I would want to get a better understanding just because it's important.
Yeah, and maybe if I could just add a little bit, you know, as the teams get into especially the data analysis and using a systems approach, especially stakeholder and community outreach, working with the communities on what's important to them. Again, with the data analysis and getting the exhibits together, showing what the deficiencies are in each of the corridors. You know, these are the policy considerations that help develop that systems approach to come up with the right solutions. And you're right. How can you say any of these are more important than the others? They're all important, but these help to frame the discussion.
And just if I may, Council President Gomez, I think this is, and I think Colleen touched on it a little bit. In this regional transportation plan, and that goes for the corridor studies, there will be emphasis on certain policies that we haven't in the past emphasized, like social equity and environmental justice issues. That's going to get into these corridor studies as we move forward. But to the point you raised, I believe, and we didn't answer your question, is there a set criteria? And the answer is not yet. It's a work in progress, and we'll be happy to work with your office to make sure that what you had in mind get incorporated. And we would like to work with all the board members to make sure that if they feel some emphasis policy areas need to be incorporated into our scopes, this is the time to do it. We're just beginning to do these corridors. But they will definitely, at least staff would recommend that there certain policy issues be incorporated more so than ever before.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And then lastly, my last point, Chair, I do, in the recommendation of creating an analysis for the purple line along with the I-5 corridor does make sense just because both are interlinked. I'm a huge supporter of the purple line. I think it's a needed project that will, just like Councilmember Moreno stated, it would really create a stronger ability to create a better flow to connect people to where the jobs are, unless we start really emphasizing the South Bay as a job creation, which is something that I know a few folks are trying to create in the South Bay, and there's definitely strong room for improvements in that. But I also want to echo the idea of creating intermodal focus in the South Bay, specifically linked to border crossing. I think it's missing here. It's one of the biggest border crossings that we have, and there's a lot of room for improvements in how we are interacting with the mobility going back and forth. And I think intermodal focus will really benefit that acknowledgement of our crossing. And I would also support the idea of incorporating that, because right now I don't see that.
Just for the President Gomez's benefits, and I think Councilwoman Moreno mentioned this, Vivian Moreno mentioned this earlier. The San Isidro, which is the second largest mobility hub, and its linkages to the Grand Central, what we call Grand Central. Just reminding the board, there is about 30 mobility hub in our proposed 5 big moves so far, and these are subject to adjustment. Definitely the main one in the west and San Isidro and the border and the linkages in the border between CBX and the San Isidro and Otay Mesa are major centers the way we're thinking about them. I also want to remind the board of directors that we were just discussing the regional housing need assessment, and these mobility hubs become really important element of how we move forward in implementing our housing element. So I appreciate the emphasis on the points were raised, but I also want to make sure that we capture all the policy consideration for not only the mobility hubs, but the corridor studies, whether it's the purple line or the blue line, or all the other corridors, the 5 other corridors.
Thank you, Hassan, and thank you, Council President Gomez. Supervisor Desmond.
I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. One of the things I wanted to make a comment on, and I appreciate staff's putting this together and talking about the different corridors, but under the description of the North County Regional, the 78 corridor, I think we almost got it right. But what is not mentioned in there are the connectors, the HOV or managed lane connectors to the I-5 and the I-15 HOV lanes. So there's a statement in there that says opportunities exist to improve efficient movement of people and goods by providing missing freeway-to-freeway connectors at the I-5 and I-78, which is good. Completing the inland rail trail, more efficiency of the sprinter services, closing gaps, and providing HOV lanes on the 70, HOV and or managed lanes on the 78. But it's silent on the HOV connectors to the I-5 HOV lanes and the I-15 HOV lanes. So I'd like to ask that be part of the description for the North County Regional 78 corridor.
Thank you, Supervisor Desmond. Mayor Sotelo Solis. Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to, I did not have my hand raised, but thank you to staff for the report. I think, again, this gives us a great starting point. Well, a continuation, should I say, of opportunities that will continue to make inter and multimodal connections amongst our communities. So I will be, for this item, Mr. Chair, do we have to have a a motion for the?
No, this is discussion
information.
only.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I saw your chat message that said 4 times hand up, Chair. Hola.
That was
No,
for
it was
the
maybe
last
from before.
item. Oh, yeah,
Not
no, last time.
Not a problem. Let me just add, you know, I'm glad to have this information from staff and appreciate the hard work. And I understand it's the comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. But I look at the 67 and I want to make sure that we're talking about what we need to be talking about, public safety. I'm glad that's listed #1 on policy considerations, even though there was some equivocation about all these things are equal. 67 needs lanes so we can move people out when we have a wildfire, not if we have a wildfire, when we have a wildfire. So I just want to emphasize that that's what I'm going to be looking for in that multimodal plan. Hassan, it looked like you're getting ready to say something.
Chair Voss, yes. We're assuring you that we're looking at the 67 and the way you funded it is to look at safety as #1 priority for that corridor. Absolutely.
Appreciate that clarification. Do we have any other board comment before we move on from this item? I'm not seeing hands raised.
Mr. Chair?
But yes.
I'd like to also, I don't know, I made the suggestion that I'd like to see that the clarification gets in for the HOV connectors for the 78 at both ends of it. Is staff agreeable to updating that, or do I need to make a motion, or how does that work?
We can include that, Supervisor.
We'll include it, Supervisor, no problem.
Yeah, I think it's always been there, but it was just omitted, and I want to make sure they can get back in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see no further board comment or hands raised on this item, and nobody waving at me. So thank you, Colleen and Richard. That was a discussion item only. So we will move on to item #7, the FY 2020 ITALC annual report. Vice Chair, yes.
I apologize for interrupting. I do see one hand with the general public.
I'm sorry. Let's get that general public comment in. My apologies.
SA8, you are please unmute.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Thank you.
Okay, then we will indeed move on to item #7, the FY 2020 ITALC annual report. Vice Chair Kenny, take it away.
Well, good morning, Chair, board members. My name is Mike Kenny. I am the recently elected chair of the Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee for the Transnet Ordinance, or ITALC, and I'm pleased to present the annual report, the 2020 annual report for ITALC. Over the course of the past few months, we have presented twice to the board and the Transportation Committee. We have presented the results of 2 audits. In April, we presented our 2019 fiscal audit to the Transportation Committee. This is the 11th year of our audit. The audit confirmed that all of the member agencies, cities, the county, the transit agencies, Caltrans and Sandag, were in general compliance with all of the major provisions in the required by the fiscal audit and the ordinance itself. This year, we also saw further implementation of the recommendations contained in the 2018 Transnet Triennial Performance Audit. To date, 6 of those recommendations have been carried out. Those recommendations have been deemed critical or high in importance to the ITALC. In addition, we have one that we're continuing to work on, the establishment of a performance framework document, and we anticipate that being done by the end of the calendar year. Consistent with our role in overseeing the Transnet program, today's item summarizes the ITALC's activities in one document, our 2020 annual report. This year's report is geared towards looking to the future with respect to our next triennial performance audit. I mentioned the 2018 document. We're going to be entering into 2021 shortly, and that'll kick off our next triennial performance audit. In addition, we'll provide a status of the Transnet program accomplishments, and we're also anticipating the board's development of the 2021 regional plan, which will be part of our purview for the next year. For the year ahead, we plan to continue our role in monitoring the program and providing recommendations that strengthen the performance both with our annual fiscal and compliance audits, as well as the 2021 triennial performance audit. Attachment 1 to your report includes this year's annual report. With that, I'll conclude my remarks. Happily submit this to the board and the general public. And with that, Julie Barras and I are available for any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. Tessa, do we have any public comment on this?
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any raised hands at this time.
Board members, comments or questions for the iTalk team? I'm hearing somebody's microphone open up. No, last call. Comments or questions from the board on the iTalk annual report? Okay, well, we will say thank you, appreciate that, and we will move on. Appreciate all your hard work. We're going to take item 8 at our next meeting and skip over to item 9 that we want to make sure that we get to. Implementation of SB 743. Keith, would you like to introduce the panel for us today?
Yes, good morning, Chair Voss and members of the board. I'll introduce the panel in a second. On July 1st, though, I wanted to let you know that SB 743 went into effect, and this transforms the whole way that we do transportation impact analysis under CEQA. You may recall that at your February board meeting, we had Kate Gordon, the director of OPR, that's the Office of Planning and Research, give an overview of how states' regulations relate to greenhouse gas and vehicle miles traveled. Today, we'll talk about the vehicle miles traveled and how that is being implemented both from a land use perspective and a transportation perspective. Next slide, please. So let me introduce the panel for today's presentation, and I'll ask all the panelists to keep their presentations very short, considering the time. Mr. Eric Rohr is the Director of Traffic Engineering at VRPA Technologies. He is here representing the Institute of Transportation Engineers and was the chair of a task force to prepare regional implementation guidelines for SB 743. Also with us is Ms. Elisa Muto, who is the Deputy Director of Environment and Mobility Planning at the City of San Diego. She's an expert at land use and environmental planning and will be discussing the implementation of 743 from a land use perspective. Also with us is Mr. Chris Schmidt, who has served as a statewide Caltrans SB 743 project manager since 2019 and recently took a promotion to become the right-of-way of Deputy Director for District 11. Chris will be discussing the implementation of SB 743 from a transportation system state highway perspective. Finally, Mr. Mike Lander, our senior transportation modeler, completes the panel, and we'll be discussing the resources and tools available to local jurisdictions as they go about implementing SB 743. To set the stage real quickly, I'm just going to give you the 50,000-foot version of the what, why, and how of SB 743. Next slide. So what is it? SB 743 was signed in 2013 with the intent to modernize the way transportation impact analysis is done under CEQA. New methodologies were desired to help align the goals of the state to reduce GHG and promote multimodal transportation planning with a diversity of land uses. OPR was tasked to update the CEQA guidelines, which they did in 2018. Statewide implementation started July 1st. Next slide. What did it do? Automobile delay shall no longer be considered a significant impact on our environment pursuant to CEQA. We're used to seeing levels of service as congestion of cars on the freeway, and that's how we'd analyze it under CEQA. That is no longer the metric to use. OPR is recommending a vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, which is no more than just the number of cars and the distance they travel. Next slide. So why? OPR looked at various areas across the United States, and they realized that good grades and the level of service, which is the metric for congestion, did not result in success in transportation planning. The left slide says good levels of service, but low accessibility to any place you want to go, grocery store, pharmacy, etc. The right slide shows a bad level of service, but high accessibility. You can get there by biking or walking or other areas. So it results in less travel time. Next slide. OPR recognized that the last 10 years legislation has really charted a course for sustainability based upon infill development, improved mass transit, and reduction of greenhouse gases. Simply put, if you promote infill development, you provide increased mobility choices, it's going to reduce GHG and traffic-related auto impacts. Next slide. How? How's more complicated than this slide, but for this presentation, I'll look at it just from what OPR is recommending on a per capita or per employee VMT basis. that if you're 15% below the regional average, there's not a significant impact. You're scot-free, you go on an expedited process. Next slide. If you're above that, that's when you have a significant impact. You have to do a traffic analysis and provide mitigation. I know that was very quick. Some of the other presenters will get into it a little bit more. But at this point, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Mr. Eric Rohr for the implementation guidelines. Eric, next slide.
Yes, I'm Eric Rohr, and I'm a transportation engineer with VRPI Technologies. Today, I'll be representing the Institute of Transportation Engineers, also known as ITE, and I'll be talking about regional implementation guidelines that we wrote to implement the SB 743 legislation that Keith just described. Next. And I'll take you back first to the year 2000, and in that year, ITE and the San Diego Traffic Engineers Council provided level service-based traffic impact study guidelines for the San Diego region, and it was thought at that time that there was a need for consistency in the way that traffic impact studies were done throughout the region. And then when the SB 743 legislation was passed, and particularly when it was adopted into CEQA in December 2018, we realized that our guidelines would be obsolete and new guidelines were needed. We gathered a task force together and prepared new guidelines for transportation impact studies in the San Diego region, and they were finalized in May of 2019. Next slide, please. This just shows the first two pages of our guidelines, and it highlights the fact that over 30 transportation engineers and planners from around the region, both public agencies and from private consultants, came together to create these guidelines. Next slide. And the purpose of our guidelines, they're basically a technical resource for our members and for anyone who wants to use them to help in implementing SB 743 at the detailed technical level. And I'll go over some of the key points that we include. We include a Vmt analysis methodology, so basically looking at how vehicle miles traveled is calculated in the San Diego region. We have a couple of recommendations for determining the minimum project size for land development projects, what level of project requires a VMT analysis and what level of project is too small and doesn't need a VMT analysis. We also talk about VMT methodology for transportation projects because SB 743 applies to both transportation and land development projects. Next slide. We also talk about VMT thresholds, so how much VMT would need to be generated by a project before it creates a significant CEQA impact. And also we include additional detail that's not specified in guidelines that were prepared by the state. Next slide. And I wanted to mention that 6 agencies that in the San Diego region have told me that they're preparing agency-specific guidelines for SB 743. And this is not a requirement of CEQA. It's totally up to the agency whether you want to prepare specific guidelines. You do, however, need to implement the VMT standard per SB 743 as of July 1st. But whether you choose to create agency-specific guidelines is up to you as an agency. And next, we're going to hear from one of the agencies that did produce agency-specific guidelines, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Alyssa Muto of the City of San Diego.
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, my camera is not working today. So my name is Alyssa Muto, City of San Diego. I'm the Deputy Director in Environment and Mobility Planning. Next slide. So the implementation of SB 743 really is tied directly to land use planning and development. And in the City of San Diego, we start with a really good foundation of our general plan, our community action plan, and our zoning and other initiatives that we have in our department and across the city. Next slide. And that development process is really intended, and implementation of SB 743 is intended to align with those climate goals. The climate goals for reducing mobile source emissions of greenhouse gas and specifically as it relates to changing modes to transit, pedestrian, or biking, or a combination thereof. Next slide. But how do we make that happen? And in the city of San Diego, so next slide, we did this with a new initiative. Please advance the slides. With a new initiative called Complete Communities. Next slide. Complete Communities is a citywide initiative, and it's comprised of 4 pillars of housing solutions, play everywhere, mobility choices, and infrastructure now. These are all interconnected, and definitely one cannot move forward without the other, and being really holistic in the way we are thinking about implementation of planning, land use, and transportation. Next slide. So specifically, mobility choices is about targeting those strategic investments in biking, walking, and transit facilities, and making those investments in an equitable way. We are also doing this to provide for safe and convenient mobility options that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and generally improve our air quality. It also will provide for a streamlined development near transit. Next slide. So mobility choices for the city of San Diego is a multi-part initiative, and it includes the threshold under the California Environmental Quality Act, which many of you have moved forward in your own jurisdictions, but also an ordinance to implement, and then an EIR, a program EIR, to allow for that streamlining under CEQA. And this is both to implement SB 743 and to further streamline projects. We also included an active transportation in lieu fee calculator. This is going to be a tool that city developers and interested persons can go in, take a look at what a project would be, where it would be located, and what any fees or improvements would be required to implement the project. This really will provide certainty for the costs associated with those improvements necessary to implement SB 743 in the city. Next slide. So why mobility choices? Let me first orient you with this map here. The circles on the map are our transit priority areas as mapped by SANDAG. Those are the areas that have high frequency transit, whether it's trolley, bus rapid transit, or multiple transit bus lines coming together. The areas in blue are the areas within the city of San Diego that are most VMT efficient under SB 743 utilizing SANDAG's mapping. The areas in yellow are the areas that are less VMT efficient in the city of San Diego using the same maps, and they are located around some of our areas outside of TPAs. Next slide. But what we're moving towards, as I mentioned, is a safer and healthier city. With fewer cars on the road means safer roads, and safer roads means more connected neighborhoods. And within those areas, we can also realize more space for recreation and exercise. This includes better crosswalks, traffic calming features, and fewer cars. Safe and viable options for recreation and exercise by foot and bike, and increased connections between our neighborhoods. Next slide. But these are strategic investments that we're looking towards with the implementation of SB 743, focusing the investment that yields the greatest citywide climate and equity success. And how do we do this? By investing in our communities close to transit. And we propose to do that investing in our communities of concern, where we know the needs are greatest in the city. And this also helps to reduce the regional VMT. Next slide. As part of our regulations, we've implemented a zone structure to the city of San Diego. The areas in blue are mobility zones 1, 2, and 3. In zone 1, there would be no measures required, and project is generally streamlined and screened from further SB 743 compliance. In zone 2 and 3, there are some reduction measures. Those are measures that support the use of bike, pedestrian, and transit infrastructure to reduce regional VMT. The area here in yellow, or Zone 4, the city has created this for this an in lieu fee, as this is the area of the city that would be expensive to implement those reduction measures for most of the projects. Next slide. So lastly, I want to share with you how those implementation measures align very directly with our City of San Diego Climate Equity Index. Here you'll see the areas in pink are those areas that are communities of concern. So the areas that we will be investing the fee in the blue areas most closely align with those areas of the communities of concern, resulting in an equitable approach to implement this policy in the Climate Action Plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Chris Schmidt from Caltrans.
Hi, good morning. This is Chris Schmidt. I am the former SB 743 coordinator for the state, and I'll just briefly discuss today how this applies to the state highway system. Next slide, please. So what SB 743 is all about is capacity increasing projects. So what are those projects? An example here on the left is the North Coast Corridor project, and it is not the Mid-Coast Trolley extension. Next slide. Similarly, up in North County, the widening and improvements we made on State Route 76 is a capacity increasing project, but putting in a roundabout or traffic calming is not considered a capacity increasing project. Next slide. So non-capacity increasing projects fall into a number of different categories. Many of the projects funded by SB 1 to rehabilitate and maintain our roadway infrastructure are not considered capacity increasing. The projects we do on the state highway system under the SHOP, similarly, as I mentioned, reconfiguring existing infrastructure, traffic calming is not. Certainly safety improvements are not considered capacity increasing, and improvements for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit are not, as well as I mentioned, rehabilitating and maintaining the existing infrastructure. Next slide. So in the San Diego region, what kind of projects are subject to the 743 requirements? It's the capacity increasing projects, and the ones depicted here are from the 2019 federal transportation plan that you adopted in 2019. So there's a number of projects on this list here on a number of the state highways throughout the region. Of course, this can change as you move forward with your adoption of the new transportation plan in the coming years. But again, any project that would expand capacity would be subject to the VMT analysis requirements. Next slide. So what Caltrans is doing is putting the guidance documents together as to how you're going to need to do analysis for that. The project teams that typically work on this are going to be guided by two primary documents, the TAF and the TAC, that provide the guidance necessary and follow the direction of the Office of Planning and Research, and as well in being in alignment with the California Climate Change Plan. Next slide. So one of the big issues for transportation projects is the amount of impact from induced travel and how to deal with that in terms of mitigation. And there's a number of strategies that can be used at the project level to reduce VMT. I'll just run through a few of these, like bike ped improvements, certainly including complete streets, providing access for various modes within a corridor, providing incentives for carpooling, transit. Even electrification is related by making, basically cleaner vehicle access possible, managing the system effectively, et cetera. And a lot of what you heard about earlier in the corridor planning process can also lead to some of those very VMT reduction strategies as part of a corridor strategy. So there's details on how to do that in our guidance, and SANDAG also has a very a wonderful SANDAG toolbox for VMT reductions. Next slide. So I'll turn it over here to Mike, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the resources available from SANDAG.
Thank you, Chris. Boy, I got the wrong camera on. Okay, so actually you can go ahead and get to the next slide, please. Now I want to just go over the travel demand model. It's basically an alternatives analysis tool, and essentially the alternatives we are analyzing with it are new transportation facilities and different land use scenarios. Next. So the regional travel demand model is used regionally for SANDAG, and it's also used at a sub-regional basis for Sandag as well as for external clients, which are comprised of both the public and private sector. Next. So this is the new SB 743 VMT Screening Map Application. This is an interactive map application, and a project would come into this application and find the location and use this to screen out whether there are below that 85% threshold that Keith had mentioned earlier, and if they're not, then they're going to have to go through the next couple of steps, which is further analysis and potential mitigation. Next slide, please. This is another interactive map application that serves up basically average daily traffic, or ADTs, for every link in our network. We can go to the next. The Climate Action Plan portal is actually a newer resource. It's based on methodology that was developed in-house and actually published via Eric Rohr's ITE committee. Just really quick, I wanted to point out that this methodology puts VMT under the context of origins and destinations. And really, the city of Solana Beach is the extreme example because of all the VMT found within the border of the city of Solana Beach. Using this methodology, it turns out that 85% of it is simply people passing through the city, the majority, of course, on I-5. Next slide. The Mobility Management Toolbox is another resource. I mentioned earlier, if that project went into the screening map and it was determined that they did not get below the threshold, they could come into this tool and actually try to quantify VMT reductions based on TDM and TSM strategies implemented at the project or community level. Next. Just really quick, here is our transportation analysis and modeling team. Technically, Cheryl Mason, the manager of the Service Bureau, is not part of this department in another department, but I wanted to include her in here because we honestly could not function without her. Next. Here is a list of basically all our public agency Service Bureau clients. Every member agency is on here because over the years we've done work for each agency, and also many of our advisory members are up here too as clients of the Sandag Service Bureau. Next. So here's actually now a list of the products that we can get out of the travel demand model, but let's kind of just zoom in on our subject matter of SB 743. So if we go to the next slide, this is actually an example now of a report that we've produced. This one in particular was done in support of the Port's Master Plan update. We did this about 6 or 7 months ago. And actually, if we go to the next, we can actually zoom in on some of the numbers. And here you can see the value of a report like this. So now the Port can look at how does their District 1 or Shelter Island compare in VMT to the community it's in, to the jurisdiction that it's in, to the region, of course, and noting that as per 743 legislation, we do put it under the context of VMT per resident as well as VMT per employee. And actually, that is all I have for you today. And with that, next slide, we'll hand it back to Keith.
That concludes our presentation, Chair. We try to be as brief as possible, but if you'd like to answer any questions or have any questions, we can answer them for you. We can also report back at future board meetings or TC to let you know how the implementation is going.
Thanks, and thanks to the team for abbreviating a little bit. The meeting has turned out a little longer than I expected. Excuse me, Jack, I see your hand, but let me first see if we have any public comment. Tessa?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have 2 hands raised for public comment.
Okay, we'll take only those 2 public comments. Go ahead.
The first public commenter is telephone number, last 3 digits, 056. You are unmuted.
Good morning, Chair and board members. This is Noah Harris, Transportation Policy Advocate with Climate Action Campaign. I'm speaking today in strong support of SB 743, which required local jurisdictions to switch their measurement of transportation impacts from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. This switch was intended to incentivize infill development and the sustainable transportation infrastructure we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector and stop the climate crisis. Because of LOS, congestion has traditionally been mitigated with road widening. After years of conclusive research, we know that expensive road widening projects catalyze a slurry of disastrous impacts, including induced car demand, increased vehicle miles and greenhouse gas emissions, and continual sprawl development. As such, switching to the VMT metric is a great step in the right direction towards reducing driving and building a climate-safe future. I also want to take this opportunity to express serious concerns about the county's implementation plans. Supervisors have moved forward with guidelines that not only preserve the status quo, but make it as easy as possible to continue developing sprawl, effectively reversing the legislative intent of the bill. Climate Action Campaign and our partners are monitoring jurisdictions closely to ensure successful implementation of SB 743 that is consistent with state climate law. Thank you.
And Tessa, our final public comment?
Yes, Mr. Steve Link.
Hello. Hi, my name is Steve Linke. I'm a Carlsbad Traffic and Mobility Commissioner, but I'm commenting as an individual. Here in Carlsbad, we already have multiple development applications with VMT studies under review, and I submitted an email to the board with some concerns and suggestions related to VMT studies in the region. So some jurisdictions will apparently use the VMT maps generated by Sandag, which you just saw, and will require the use of Sandag methods and scripts for their analysis, and will use the region-wide VMT averages as the basis for their 85% threshold to determine how much mitigation needs to be done for VMT. And that should probably be considered the gold standard. However, other jurisdictions like Carlsbad have generated VMT maps through outside consultants and will apparently allow other consultants to use their own methods and scripts for model runs. And we'll also be using our own citywide average VMT as the basis for comparison rather than the regional average. I believe that the consultant that made our maps is highly respected in the field, but it's curious to me that their VMT numbers are significantly different than Sandag's, even though they are based on the same underlying data. They're about 20% higher than Sandag's numbers. And I'm also concerned that our VMT maps have project analysis zones that are much smaller than the ones that Sandag is comfortable using for statistical reasons. And one of the most non-transparent aspects to me is that the scripts used to do the model runs are not standardized. And apparently there's a small group of consultants who are authorized by Sandag to run scripts to do these model runs. But it's unclear to me how those consultants have been vetted or how reliable their results are or how comparable they are to Sandag. So I fear without some standardization or additional guidance that it's going to be very difficult for lay people in the public and advisory and decision-making bodies to be able to critically analyze these VMT studies or compare different applications conducted using different methods and scripts. So I wrote in my email a few suggestions, and one is to have Sandag maintain a public list of the third parties that are certified to conduct VMT studies using the Sandag system, as well as a description of the qualifications that are necessary to get that certification, to publish concordant studies showing that the VMT maps and model runs using Sandag's methods and scripts are substantially equivalent to those produced by outside consultants, to publish sensitivity studies showing that some of the subjective decisions done when you're doing a model run do not substantially alter the VMT results, and finally, for Sandag to provide additional guidance to us who are reviewing applications on how to critically review the studies. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. And I believe we have one final public comment. Tessa?
Yes, Chair. Michael Queenan did raise his hand.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I appreciate this chance to speak, and thank you for the great presentation. I don't know if this is the with this bill, if this is a place where this could be applicable. I just was wondering if the thought of opening up the transportation system to private companies like they have in New York City and even Tijuana. Obviously, they have a massive private transportation system that runs 24 hours with smaller vehicles. very efficient, comes in very frequently, and they would just naturally fill the gaps, and that could be implemented very quickly. It would be very low cost to the city and county. They would may even bring in income. So I don't know, I just kind of might plant that seed really. I don't know if there's a place to do that, but just to kind of throw that out there as an option to maybe build a system in the meantime while these other bigger systems are getting built. It's definitely an option that I just want to kind of mention.
Thank you, sir. That concludes our public comment board. This is a discussion only item. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand, and I'd appreciate if you keep it as brief as possible. Deputy Mayor Feller.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is for Chris at Caltrans. The implementation chart he had, and I was thinking that maybe what I would really like to see is that chart again, whether that could be sent out to us in the PowerPoint, because it didn't. I didn't get a good enough chance to look at it. So
I'm sure we can have staff send out the entire PowerPoint. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
Mayor Sotelo Solis, I see you there. Did you want to speak? No? Okay. Any other board member comments or questions? Please raise your hand or pop up on my screen so I can see you. Keith and the panel, thank you again. I suspect we'll be revisiting this topic in the not too distant future. Appreciate the input. We will move along. Tessa, do we have any continued public comment from the beginning?
I see no further hands raised, Chair.
Perfect, thank you. Our next meeting is July 24th, 9 a.m. Look forward to seeing you then. We are adjourned.